Le Chaudron Infernal releases the Infernal Cauldron and the Phantasmal Vapors in the United States, and the Infernal Cauldron in the UK, is a French occult trick film written, directed, and edited by Georges Méliès. Released in 1903, it also stars Méliès as the demon Belphegor, with the rest of the cast going uncredited, as was common for the time. At 1 minute and 38 seconds, it's silent, and I would classify it as appropriate for audiences 10 years old and up due to some mild violence. We know very little about the production of this film. It was likely filmed at Georges Méliès' home studio outside of Paris and was released by his production company, Star Film Company. Méliès would have also, at least partially, designed and worked on the film's costumes, sets, and special effects, the latter of which included substitution splices, pyrotechnics, and multiple exposure, a technique that involves repeatedly opening the shutter of a camera to expose a single piece of film to light multiple times. This results in several images being layered on top of each other. As with several of Méliès' films, this one was hand-colored frame by frame at the studio of Elisabeth and Mary Berthoullier, a mother-daughter pair of colorists who operated out of Paris and are remembered today for their extensive work with Méliès. At their height, the pair employed 200 colorists, all of them women, and their studio primarily used aniline dyes that were dissolved in water and alcohol. Each colorist would have been assigned a specific color, passing the film down in an assembly line fashion to be painted. Often the details they were painting were so minute that a brush with a single horsehair would have been used often. On average, it cost 600 francs for 300 meters of film to be colored, which means that the coloring of the Infernal Cauldron, measuring at 36 meters, would have cost around 720 francs, or roughly $127 or 95 pounds today. This trick film is purely about spectacle, so there's not much plot to speak of. Demons drag 3 people into a large chamber and sacrifice them, one after the other, by throwing them into a cauldron. And that's literally it. Due to its short length and minimal story, there isn't really much to say about this film. It was solely intended to be a showcase for special effects, and it does that well, albeit not nearly as impressively as some of Méliès' more extravagant projects. The coloring here is very consistent and bright, the pyrotechnics look great, and the multiple exposure effect for the spirits is really nice and foggy. The choreography is also largely pretty good. There's a sort of violence to it that I found to be atypical for the era, especially with the way that the woman is shoved into the scene on a catchpole. That said, they do deposit everyone into the cauldron a little too gently, and the man waiting for his turn to be sacrificed seems a bit too calm, all things considered. Overall, though, this film is a fun little display of special effects. Nothing particularly memorable or mind-blowing, but not necessarily a waste of time either. I am going to give the Infernal Cauldron a 2.5 out of 5, and I recommend it to anyone interested in early special effects. Le Revenant releases the Apparition or Mr. Jones' Comical Experience with a Ghost in the United States, The Ghost and the Candle in the UK, and just Apparitions later on, is a French horror comedy ghost trick film written, directed, and edited by Georges Méliès. Released in 1903, it also stars Méliès as the Traveler, with the rest of the cast going uncredited, though I'm pretty sure that Méliès' mistress and eventual second wife, Jeanne Dassy, plays the ghost. At 2 minutes and 35 seconds, it's silent, and I would classify it as appropriate for ages 10 years old and up due to a brief incident of sexual harassment. As with the Infernal Cauldron, we know almost nothing about the production of this film. Again, it was likely filmed at Georges Méliès' home studio outside of Paris, and it was released by his production company, Star Film Company. He similarly would have worked in part on the film's costumes, set, and special effects, the latter of which included things like substitution splices, wire work, and soft focus, which is an effect created using a lens with a spherical aberration to add a blurry, dreamlike cast to an image. I do briefly want to discuss the social climate of the era in which this film was made. The Belle Époque, or the Beautiful Era, was a period in France that began with the end of the Franco-Prussian War in 1871 and lasted until 1914 with the outbreak of World War I. It was so named because it was perceived as this time of peace, financial stability, and significant scientific and artistic progress. And to an extent, it was. Now, of course, that doesn't mean there wasn't notable poverty in France. And it also erases the fact that part of the reason France was thriving during this era was because of its brutal colonialism and global expansion. It was not a beautiful era for the people that France colonized in countries like Tunisia, Vietnam, and Madagascar. But in France itself, there was notably some social progress, especially for French women. For example, a woman's right to divorce was reinstated in 1884 thanks to the efforts of French chemist and politician Alfred Niquet, and the French Union for Women's Suffrage was founded in 1909 by Jean Schmal. Additionally, feminist advocates began publishing a great deal of literature at the time. Some women entered into male-dominated fields, and Marguerite Durand established the first all-female-run newspaper, Le Fronde. While French women were by no means equal at this point, and would not gain the right to vote until the 1940s, this era was still notable for the manner in which women began to more visibly advocate for themselves, and this influenced public opinion, a fact that is actually subtly apparent in this film. Upon arriving at an inn one night, an elderly traveler immediately makes a pass at one of the inn's maids, who quickly flees his advances. Unashamed, he simply sits down to read the newspaper, only for his candle to begin tormenting him, moving on its own, growing in size, and lighting his newspaper on fire. When he tries to put out the fire, the ghost of a beautiful woman manifests, first flirting with him, before transforming into a hideous specter that he attempts and fails to fight. In many ways, this film is almost a remake of Méliès' 1897 film, The Bewitched Inn, which also briefly tells the story of a traveler who finds himself tormented by moving objects in an inn. But, despite the fact it's a retread in a lot of ways, I would classify this as an improvement on the original concept, an example of an artist revisiting a prior work and doing more with it now that he has experience and, maybe more importantly, a higher budget. For starters, there's an actual storyline here. The traveler has a personality now. He's a lecherous old man. And rather than being randomly tormented by an unseen force, he's being punished for his behavior towards a woman by a notably female ghost. There's a message here regarding men who attempt to violate women, even if it's played comically. And I really like this layer being added to the original concept. All of this is unsurprisingly sold by how hard Méliès commits to the bit. He is a creepy pervert, but he's also a comedic straight man. He responds to the candle moving on its own with nothing but mild annoyance. When it gets huge, he's only bothered because that means he has to try to climb it so he can keep reading his paper. Even when a ghost manifests, he isn't afraid, he just tries to hit on her. It all really got me, especially when it's followed up by the ghost's little dance, which reminded me a lot of the creature's dance in Méliès' 1903 film, The Monster. And all of these elements are brought together by the technical aspects of the film, which are largely quite good. The painted set has depth, and the ghost, when she becomes monstrous, has some sincerely creepy makeup. Méliès' old age makeup, while not realistic, is decent in a sort of theatrical way, save for whatever it is he did to his head, which gives him a weird xenomorph skull. I spent the first minute or so trying to figure out what kind of creature he was and realizing the answer was just old. Obviously, though, the best technical aspects are the special effects. The wirework and dissolve are very smooth, the giant candle prop is really cute, and the soft focus added to the ghost gives her a genuine feel of transparency that I would say some modern movies have struggled to achieve. Overall, the film is not completely amazing or anything close to Méliès' best work, but it's still pretty funny and kind of vindicating to watch a creepy old man get put in his place. I am going to give The Apparition or Mr. Jones' Comical Experience with a Ghost a 3 out of 5. I would recommend it to anyone who's interested in Méliès' work, early horror comedy, or just plain good old-fashioned slapstick. Thank you all so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. And I am still blown away that we've broken 100 subscribers. I genuinely never expected that to happen. I just want to say I have a few announcements. Firstly, in my next video, I'm going to be discussing the 1903 French occult trick film, The Damnation of Faust, and the 1905 French horror comedy trick film, The Black Imp. Secondly, I have an Instagram now at Under the Fleapit. I'm mostly just going to be posting announcements for new videos, but I also share horror art that I like and some political things. And finally, I have made a Patreon. So far, it's just a place to support the channel. You can donate $1 a month if you want. I'm hoping to eventually post more content there and have additional affordable member tiers that would include privileges like early access to videos, access to less censored videos once I start covering later horror, and an ability to suggest movies to me for me to review. If you enjoyed this video, a like and subscribe would be very appreciated, and you can follow me on Blue Sky, Letterboxd, and Instagram at Under the Fleapit. If you like what I do and you want to support the channel, my Patreon and Ko-fi are both linked in the description. Until next time, this has been Under the Fleapit. Stay spooky!